is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 628. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how's your week?
Oh, fantastic.
Good week?
Oh, yeah.
Got some nice, dinner? What, went for a walk?
I just had some things work out really well, and I'll share when I can. Don't like vague booking, but you did in fact entrap me there. So.
Wow, I did. I kind of pushed you into a corner. Well, okay, well we'll wait to hear about that, but that sounds promising. Yeah, I've had a good week over here as well, making these watch videos, doing the podcast, just doing all the things. Also, big revelation, Luis, I may have found a new lemonade for my APs at home.
Whoa. That's a game changer. It's a game changer.
It's a little more sour, but I like that end of it. I don't like it as sweet. And, we might have had a new one. It's currently in the testing phase, but we'll see. So on the show this week, we've got Q&A show. These are some of our absolute favorite episodes to do where we answer our questions from our patrons. If you're a patron of the show, you get access to the Patreon feed, and that lets you, ask questions for these types of shows, and you can be any level and you'll get those you'll get access to that. So thanks to our patrons, and for everybody who asks questions, we're going to go through as many of them as we can today. Before we get into that though, our sponsors, channelfireball.com, this place to go for everything you need magic, and even in some cases gaming related. If you're into Pokemon or Flesh and Blood as well, they've got a ton of stuff over at CFB for that. And of course, look, it's a holiday season. If you are looking to get presents for your Magic playing friends, family members, maybe even something for yourself, channelfireball.com is definitely where you want to go. They've got a full selection of singles thanks to the marketplace, but you can also pick up sealed product or supplies or anything like that make really great gifts for the holiday season. If you do end up picking up anything, if you use the affiliate code LR at checkout, it lets them know that we sent you over and it helps out the show, and we do appreciate it. Also, FTX.com outside the US, and FTX.us for United States-based customers. This is, the way things are going. NFTs, cryptocurrencies, and really the technology of the blockchain and what people can build on it by decentralizing a ledger. It sounds so boring when you say it that way, but when you look at the possibilities of what it can do, your imagination kind of starts to fly. And I think we're really just seeing the beginnings of what this can do. If you're interested in buying these things, if you want to invest or to put some of your money into it, FTX is the place to go. They're safe and regulated, and they've got a great app as well as a website that you can use to manage your digital assets. And we do encourage you to go check them out if you're interested in doing such things. If you are, of course, make sure that you consult an investing professional before doing so, as investing, of course, carries risk, and you want to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting yourself into before you jump in.
I do want to mention, by the way, the FTX charity draft that's coming up in a couple weeks here.
Yeah.
So this is on the 27th, so a little less than 2 weeks from when we're recording it, and we're going to be doing a vintage cube draft where we, I think the way they're going to end up setting it up is we each pick a charity and then play for that charity. They're going to donate a bunch of money, and we're looking forward to it. So you can. I think both of us will be streaming it, so you can check that out, and we'll have more details for you as we completely flesh it out. But they're committed to making this a cool event and to just giving away all the money involved to charity. So that sounds like a lot of fun to me.
Yeah, all the money except for your prize money, as you negotiated, will be going to charity.
Of course.
No, but this is actually something worth noting too. Not just the event, but also one of the reasons that we liked FTX and decided to go with them was that they really do have a kind of a fundamental premise about the company of trying to make the world a better place. That's one of the stated goals of Samuel Bankman-Fried, who owns it, runs it. And you can see that has permeated the culture from top to bottom and the people that we've talked to as well. This is one of the ways that we get to be involved with it, giving back to charities and such. So that is something to look forward to. And like Louis said, we'll give you more information. We're not going to do a crack-a-pack this time around. I did want to give you one update, Luis, before we get into the questions, because I think I forgot to. The decks that we drafted. Remember when we did the...
Yep.
Yeah. So the green-white deck was absurd, and that was our best of three, and I did get the trophy with it. And the cool part was that in the first round, the second and third round, we just rolled our opponents. If you remember, that deck was just completely insane. And, but in the first round, my opponent played, what is it called? Blood Vial Purveyor? No, that's a different card. Whatever. The 5/6 Flying Trample Vampire.
No, that's right. Blood Vial Purveyor. You got it right.
Okay. Oh, wow. All right. Anyway, they played that on turn 4 every game, all 3. It ended up being 3 games. We lost 2 at once and somehow beat it the other 2 times. That's how good that deck was. And it wasn't like we just had the removal spell either. Like, it took some serious work and a lot of blood tokens to find the answers. But anyway, we did that. And then the next week I finished playing the black-white medium deck, and we actually trophied with that too. So that was a lot luckier. That deck was way more medium, and we just had some really good matchups for it and ended up getting the job done. Okay, let's jump into our questions. I actually have one from Marcus from a little while back. It says, hi, you recently discussed apps that provide overlays while drafting in Arena, like Untap GG recently added functionality to not only show point values for cards, but also to take into account what was already drafted. Have you seen that feature, and where would you draw the line between legitimate help and cheating when it comes to app use?
So when he says already drafted, what does that mean exactly?
I don't know, actually. And one of the questions that Marcus asks is, have you seen that feature? And the answer is no, I have not seen that feature. So I'm not really sure exactly what it does.
Yeah.
So if we don't want to address that directly, that's fine, because we don't really know what it is. But what about, that line, the bigger picture, not just with Untap, but any of these type of, they call them HUDs, heads up display, and poker, that could show a heck of a lot of information and in some ways started to kind of ruin the games. Most of the sites actually banned them from being used, the heads up displays, because they felt that it gave players with those a certain advantage and kind of wrecked the game. Do you see anything like that for Arena?
So it's tricky because presumably, I mean, I guess I don't want to assume too much of Arena given their track record in terms of how they program things. Presumably, Arena's not showing info that it shouldn't, right? Like you wouldn't be able to use one of these to like see what you were going to draw next or see what was in your opponent's hand. That said, it does get a little tricky when you're looking at it's like kind of like the poker apps, I guess. Like, what information do you have access to that you technically would know, but most humans can't collate all that information, right?
Totally. And that was the key for those apps. Exactly. That information was there. It wasn't getting you anything that was hidden, but no person could actually do it.
Yeah. So I don't know the answer as to like what crosses the line. I tend not to use most of that stuff just because I don't really care. Like part of it is like I just want to kind of play the way I would play if I was playing at an event with stakes I really cared about, right? Like I don't want to end up getting too reliant on something that you're not going to have access to in a tournament. But I guess the funny thing is, if you play on Arena now for like these big tournaments, you actually can use those apps. It's not against the rules. Like that's something that Wizards has been clear about, just because I guess they can't. Part of it is probably they can't really police it, But at the end of the day, I don't know. I kind of feel like it's what the information the client gives is probably fine. I just don't know. I don't know how much that how at what point does it cross the line? And I maybe there is a point. I don't know what that is though.
Yeah, it got really interesting for poker because, there is some aspect to these games where you are trying to figure out what the human being in the seat can do with what they have in front of them, right? It's supposed to reward people who are better at managing that information or managing their emotions or coming up with strategies and stuff. And less, and so the less of that type of outside help, the better, would be kind of the core premise, I think, to just like, I don't know, the spirit of competition or something along those lines. But as you mentioned, it's not really enforceable in many ways. They actually ended up banning them where the client doesn't allow that on the poker one. So maybe there's some wiggle room there, but it still feels like you could come up with some workaround if you really wanted that information. And it gets really blurry. Like, for example, almost everybody, when I was playing online, used an app that would record all of your hands. Now, you didn't have to use a heads up display, but you could go back and look at like a session and see how did I do? Right? Like, how did I do in each of these positions? How did I do with these hands? How did I do when I was the first to raise versus when I didn't? How did I do in pots where I 3-bet versus ones when I didn't? And you could go study that and then learn from it and then come back to the table and do it. And, most people didn't have an issue with that. Right. So it's like, well, where does that line get drawn on, the help that you get from computers and things like that? Because if you take it to its natural conclusion, let's say that there's a heads up display and it says all of this information about what my opponents are doing in real time. Well, then I'm supposed to interpret that information and then use it. But what if I could just have a computer interpret that information and I could tell it what to do, right? Basically program a computer to play the way that I think was correct, and then it does it. That seems to cross the line for basically everybody, where it's like, well, you're not even playing anymore. Like, you don't even have to be at the computer. You could just be gone. And now we just have bots playing against each other and it really tests who's the best at programming the bot. And, there's a line in there somewhere between when you're there and not, how much information you have and how you choose to use it. I would prefer less of this stuff. I think that direction for poker was not good for those sites. Like, it ruined the games and they had to back off on it just to get people to come back and play, because so many people don't use stuff like that, And
I mean, isn't the thing now with both poker and chess, like the concern about bots that can tell you what the optimal play is?
Yes.
In the next situation, like that seems way worse, obviously.
Way worse. Way worse. Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of what poker's become. The current high level players are all about what they call a solver, right? They have programs that are custom written that basically the very bare bones premise of it is that it tells you what the optimal play would be against itself. Meaning it runs like all the iterations of all the plays, and then it gives you like a weighted example of like 10% of the time you would do this, 30% you would do this, 60 you would do this. And it kind of spits things out, but they're so situationally specific that you basically have to memorize and see patterns in how they do it, because no human can sit there and remember all of it. And, that's where poker's at now. I think you can make an argument that that's not as fun, as.
Yeah, poker was always less about fun than money.
Exactly.
Not
that's exactly
people don't play
right.
poker for fun, but like the money aspect is way more pronounced in poker than it is in Magic.
Exactly. So yeah.
I'll be honest though, all the ones in Magic don't help you that much. I don't find them to be particularly useful, even if I wanted to like play in a tournament.
And you write
them. Well, yes, but I mean, I guess I can't speak to like the draft ones because those use my rating. So obviously, like I'm not going to think that's going to matter to me very much. But I'm talking about like the in-game stuff, like knowing there's like 7 lands left in your deck. Doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter in a really long game of limited when you're like, oh, what cards are left in my deck? And that's a thing. But it goes back to when people ask questions about like, oh, how do I like bluff better? Or how do I do mind tricks better? And it's like, how about you just like concentrate on technical play? And then once you've like really gotten good at that, look at the next. This kind of stuff is, I think, more a distraction than it is a benefit. Not saying you shouldn't use them and there's not like a little bit to be gained maybe, but I think most people probably aren't getting as much as like, I don't think this is a huge problem. This is not like poker or chess where like, oh, my opponent's using a solver. They're figuring out that I should cast bleed dry on your 5-drop or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. The way I see it is there's 2 use cases that matter here. One of them is somebody's relatively new, where I think your ratings really do help them out, right? Because they can just sort of guide them along, like maybe something that they would have not noticed, like, hey, this card's actually really good, and they just didn't even read it. So I think that that's just helpful. And, look, there's no guide that can tell you which card to take next in a draft. So that's fine to me to do that. And then there's the high level play. And currently the stuff that I've seen is more convenience than anything. Just be like, most of the time you could just sit there and go, okay, what are my actual outs to win this game this turn? But instead I can just look at the screen and go, yeah, there they are. But that doesn't really change. It's just faster, So yeah,
well,
I think
at least
we're okay
until you
now.
get untapped premium, then you get the
Then it shows you your opponent's hand. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the question, Marcus. Next one comes from Alexander Matskite, who says, when drafting, I often let myself get sidetracked by rarity, i.e. this common might be better, but the chances are so much smaller that this slightly worse uncommon is going to show up again. Do you have any tips on how to avoid this mental trap? All the best for you both. Thanks for keeping me company.
So the best tip I have, because I've done this before, who hasn't, right? Like oh, I think that I think this braid's going to be better for my deck, but oh man, what are the odds that I get another,
Yeah.
alluring suitor or whatever?
Hmm.
Um, really, just try to. It's kind of the same as when we tell people don't hate draft or don't worry about passing 3 red cards if the best card in the pack is red. Just don't worry about which one's a common, which one's uncommon. Just at all times, just try to take the card that's best for your deck.
Yeah. It does take some discipline, but what I found is that you develop like a sense for it where how when you'll be drafting, or I will, Luis, and we'll talk about eating your vegetables, right? Like, you got to take the fixing card here. You need it. There's something inside after you've drafted for a while that goes, you need to take this card. Like, I know you want that flashy rare that you already have 2 of, but you need to take this card. And I would say try to get in tune with that if you've developed that yet, Alex. Next from Jeremy says, hey guys, I hope you're doing well. These are my favorite episodes. We love them too, Jeremy. I've been reflecting on how much this game has given me. All my best friends play, and I've made so many connections through it. Who are some of your closest relationships you've made through the game? And when have they been there for you in a big non-magic way? Love you guys, and I hope your families have a wonderful Christmas season. Thanks, Jeremy. You want to go first, Elise? I mean, we probably have a list here, right?
No, I want you to go first on this one. I'm just curious.
I mean, look, there's an obvious one, and it's you, right? Like, Luis and I aren't coworkers, right? We're friends, and then we decided to join
I was going to
forces.
say we're contractually bound,
Yeah.
not coworkers as such, but more contractors.
But I mean, I don't like. I've gone through some rough patches in the past few years with the pandemic and stuff before that too, and Luis has always been there for me. Whether it was doing stuff for the show that was kind of above and beyond, or just being there to talk or whatever, and yeah, it's an easy one to say
because box of steaks.
Or remember when you sent me the steaks? Like, that was awesome. Just stuff like that. And it really matters to me. And I talk to Luis. I mean, not just on the podcast, but we're in a chat like every day. And then he'll call me if he goes on his walks, and we'll have chats. And it's just that ends up being. I mean, you're a huge part of my life, and that's only because of Magic, period. Right. And then as if I widen that out to like professional stuff too, I mean, it's insane. Like, so many of the connections and things that I've learned, it all kind of ties back into Magic. And, that's across the board. I mean, look at the coverage team and stuff. And I'm so close with so many of them, and, I'll visit them or talk to them or, just wonder what's going on in their life. And these are all people that I've met through Magic. And the cool part to me is when it kind of transcends it, when you and I can talk about stuff that has nothing to do with Magic at all. Right. And which is, most of the time we don't talk about Magic. Right. And, I'll talk to Huey or talk to Maria, talk to BDM, and, we don't really talk about Magic that much because we're just close. It's just, important people in my life, rather than it being like a Magic based relationship or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's literally too many people to list. Like, it's just about everyone who I'm really close to in my life outside of my family is in some way connected to Magic. It's not all direct, but like, and obviously, like, I share the same sentiments about you. And I think it's, like you and like Paul, talking with you guys obviously is great. Like, Chian and I used to live together, right?
Right.
We started this journey together, and everyone on Team CFB has become great friends. It's so funny because this kind of people often ask like, oh, how did you form Team Channel Fireball? Did you form a super team? Did you like figure out who was the best at everything and try to combine them? It's like, no, we just got all our friends together.
Yeah.
And we all got better together, and we, succeeded together. And that's been a lot of my professional life, has not been, jokes aside, like, I haven't tried to form a lot of these professional relationships because it was the optimal professional thing to do. I kind of started like, who are the people I want to spend time with? Who are the people I trust? Who are the people I work well with? And then you go from there. And I find that, like, if you have the luxury of doing that, which you don't always, there's a lot of professional settings where you don't get to make those choices. But I found it always to be the most, fun, engaging, like, the most passion driven, and ultimately, like in a lot of ways, the most profitable to just go into business with the people I really want to spend time with. And I'm aware there's risks. I've had bad experiences with that in the past. You know about them, like where you are putting more on the line. It's kind of like, oh, should I be roommates with my really close friend or just try to find like a stranger? And it's like, well, if you become roommates with your really close friend, you might blow up your friendship. You might just not be compatible living together. You might do something that really pisses them off. You're going to be together so much more. Maybe you'll get in a fight. Maybe you'll find out this person who you love spending time with 10 hours a week is unbearable 160 hours a week.
Right.
And the same is true of going into business with your friends, where sometimes you're going to end up in spots where there's disagreements, or someone feels like they're not getting what they're due, or you have a difference of what you should do next or what the right move is, or you have to make, tough decisions. And as bad as that can be, I've overall found it to be still overwhelmingly positive to do this. And even with some costs you pay. So Magic has been a really awesome journey in that regard. And, all of the people I'm closest to, like I said, you, Paul, Huey, Gabby, these are all people, I'm still you see at events, right? We haven't been to events for a while, but I'm still just talking with my buddies like Eirik and Matt, who I lived with in college.
Totally. Yeah. They still pop into your chat on your stream.
Yeah. It's like these are people I've known for 20 years. And I haven't lived in the same state as them for 10 years, and we still just connect so well, even though it's not really about Magic at that point, Right. When I talk to Pat Cox, I don't talk about Magic. I was in his wedding, and we talk about board games. We play those over Zoom, and we kind of make fun of the dumb stuff going on in Magic, So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to take too much time because, again, I could literally sit here for hours listing people, but I was gonna say BK, but I know he's in the chat, so it's just it just doesn't feel right,
I thought you were going to bring him up as an example of why not to work with your friends, because you had to leave Direwolf after he got there, right? You just couldn't.
Well, 4 years later or something, but no. And BK's awesome. He's someone who I met more recently through Magic, and still spent tons of time with him now, and it's been great, Yeah. So I don't know. Magic as a big social connector has been so cool for me.
Yeah, both you and I have. Yeah, it's interesting to look back at too and just see how it gets pretty big. There wouldn't be a Santi right? Yes. If it wasn't from, it's it gets kind of crazy when you look at how deeply ingrained it can be. But that just speaks to the quality of people, who play Magic. Thanks for the question. Next is from Lee, who says, "Hi, Marshall and Luis. Thank you for all you do Magic related. Now that paper Magic is slowly returning, I was wondering if you have any preferences when it comes to shuffling sleeved decks. Pile shuffle, riffle shuffle, overhand. My friends and I get together for bi-weekly sealed games, and sometimes I feel I don't always draw the best starting hands because I haven't done a good enough job shuffling. What do you recommend to avoid this from happening in the future? Thanks, and keep up the amazing content." Thanks, Lee. One thing I'll say, go ahead.
I've got a little rant here. Pile shuffling is an oxymoron. It's not shuffling. It's not random.
Right. It is
counting. If you want to count your deck by sorting it into 5 piles, do that. It is not a substitute for shuffling. I never pile shuffle. It's not a shuffle. I riffle shuffle 7 times and then do a couple side shuffles or whatever. But really, if you riffle shuffle 7 times, you're good.
That's right.
And if you're playing a format where maybe you don't want to riffle shuffle your deck, you've got your legacy deck or whatever, you can do a bunch of the side shuffle where you take your two hands and kind of mash the 2 cards together. Mm-hmm. But even then, I'd usually give a couple light riffles. I riffle shuffle my vintage deck. I don't care.
Yeah, it feels good to do it. And if you do it right, you're not going to damage the cards. I do the exact same thing. There was an article that came out a while back that really kind of broke down the math between it. And it was 7 riffle shuffles is what you need. And I said, well, I will do that then. And then, while you're waiting for the other person, I'll just do side shuffles until it goes. The other thing to mention, Lee, is that you have to remember that random does not mean equally distributed lands or spells or whatever. If you have bad draws, you can absolutely randomize perfectly and have bad draws. That's expected to have clumps of land. That's very common. So don't correlate those things. Don't say, well, I'm not shuffling well, so therefore I'm having bad draws. There's every chance that you would have good draws because you didn't shuffle well. So, just focus on getting those 7 riffle shuffles in, and then any other stuff you want to do is up to you, but it's not really actively adding to the randomization of your deck. Good question, Lee, especially for everybody getting back into it. Spencer says, Dear Marshall and or Luis, at the recent Vegas tournament, I opened what I thought was a sweet pool for such a balmy format. Definitely in white, but had a hard time deciding on the second color. My question is not if I made the right choice, but how to know if I made the right choice. I didn't make day 2, and I've had an impossible time knowing which of it was bad luck, bad deck building, or bad play. It's obvious some portion of the 3, but as far as I know, I did everything I could to correctly based off of the info I had and from your advice and from my own grinding the week before. How do you identify mistakes when you don't have perfect information? And how do you know when you're talking yourself into the wrong choice? Thanks for everything you do. I wouldn't have this hobby if not for you and Loading Ready Run. Shout out to LRR, by the way. What do you think for Spencer? This is a good question because when you play for a really long time, I think you really get a good sense for like, hey, I just got unlucky. It's fine. Move on. Or wow, I really screwed that up. But what if you're not really sure about it?
So I have good news and bad news for Spencer. The good news is you're on the right track. Like that you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I confirm? Like I don't just want to figure out what the results are because as we all know, the best deck in the world can go 0-2 and the worst deck can go 7-0. Like these are things that can happen. You know, Marshall made $2,000 at the Arena Open the other time. You know, and but results, of course, since they don't tell the full story, how do you get the full story? And the answer, this is the bad news. It's not satisfying. It's like we never know the exact answer. The best we can do is kind of just build our confidence as high as possible that we have the right answer. And what you're saying is true. Like if I like draft a deck and you're like, hey, how do I build this deck? What's my last card? Depending on the deck, sometimes I'll have a very high confidence level that like, hey, this is the last card, 100%. You should play 17 lands. You should play this as your last card. This is how you should build your deck. Sometimes it's like, well, it could be one of these 3 cards. I'm not super confident which one it is. And the more you play, the more confident you'll get. And of course, you should always be checking yourself. But in general, I think just try to do what you think is the best. Try to see what the results are. Not like necessarily did I win, but it's like I was deciding between these 2 cards. Well, what would have happened if I drawn the other one? What would happen if I drew this one? And just do that the entire draft. And you won't, again, prove anything. That's the cool thing about Magic. You don't really get to prove too much.
No.
But you do get to kind of get some little information and also just build your intuition. And that's a really strong part of it.
Definitely. I think that it starts off with kind of the premise of, are you doing things for reasons, right? Like, do you have a reason to have played the amount of lands you've played, to pick the color that you picked? And then, view it almost like a court case. Go up to somebody whose opinion you respect, a friend of yours, a Magic Pro, whatever, if you're at a live tournament, and say, this is what I did and why. Yes or no. Right. And that person, if they're going to be useful to you, will be able to say, yes, I agree with what you said, or no, and here's my reasons why. And then look, there can be a disagreement about, who was correct about the reasoning part. But the point is that a lot of people just, we call it just taking game actions, right? Like you're just sort of hitting buttons and playing cards and things are happening and I lost or I won. But the good players will have a reason for it. Now, you don't necessarily need to have that beforehand. A lot of players kind of play like Luis is like this, where he just plays and then you can ask him after, well, why did you do this? And then he'll kind of go, oh, I did it because of this. But, he was processing all that information really fast. But you do want to be able to say, look, I played white because it was obvious, and then I paired it with red because this, and this. And that seemed better to me than the alternative. If you are running it through any type of logic scheme like that, you are automatically going to just slowly but surely get better and better than somebody who doesn't. So that's huge. And then I like what Luis said. You develop an intuition for this stuff after. You know the difference at some point between when somebody is blaming bad luck when it wasn't and when it really was, right? And there's nothing wrong with recognizing that bad luck was why you lost a game. Nobody wants to hear your sob story. But if you just say, I played the appropriate number of lands, my mana base is good, my curve is good, everything's fine. I kept a reasonable 2-lander on the draw, and I went 5 draw steps without hitting my 3rd land, and I lost as a result. That is not an interesting story, but that is absolutely possible that is why you lost. And you go, yeah. I was supposed to be an 85%er to hit my 3rd land on turn 3. And it turns out it took me to turn 5 to hit it. It's like a 2% of the time that happens. Next game, right? Your intuition or your logic has led you to why you lost that particular game. And then you can just move on because there's nothing else to say about it. It's just, it happens some small percent of the time, and then you just move on. And I think the intuition about how you play really grows over time. I'll say this often, more often than I'd like, but I say it a lot, which is, my bar is like, would Luis have won this game? And there's just a lot of them that are really close that I just go, I don't know what I screwed up or where. Like, I just did something wrong, but Luis would have figured it out and would have won this game. Setting the bar high, obviously. But yeah, and I think that that's something that's useful to have, even if you can't figure out what it was that you should have done. Maybe you don't have a way to do that, but that intuition does grow over time as well. And then, again, you accept it and move on.
Well, the funny thing is my bar is, would Huey have won this game?
Yeah, that's a good one too. Okay, this next one comes from Alex, who says, "Hi, Marshall and SV, longtime listener, first time caller here. I've gotten really into team drafting this year, inspired largely by your showdowns for each set, and even got a team draft league started here in Los Angeles." I know who this is. AE Funk, by the way, in the chat. I got to meet Alex at the Vegas GP, and I even got a really cool custom Elmer token from him, signed by Mark Poole. It's made of metal. It's like really cool. Anyway, I'd love to hear the biggest lessons you've learned about team draft specifically, or any heuristics that apply differently to that format. Did you find it useful to discuss or strategize with your teammates pre-draft? In VOW specifically, do you expect team draft to favor the grindier value decks, or is it better to just curve out with decent creatures and be aggressive? Thanks, as always, for the great pod and everything you both do for the limited community. Alex, it's really interesting because I think I'm actually a really good person to ask this because if you go too old school, like Luis, they'll tell you that team draft is all about cutting cards and scrapping it out. And, you might not make enough playables on stuff, but that's just not true anymore. The drafts look really similar to just if it was a 6-player with all good players draft, where people are, yes, scrapping it out to a point, but really what it comes down to, the difference is that you have more information the more you pay attention, because basically every card that was passed. The only hidden cards are the ones that were opened and taken. Do they have a sweeper? Well, they've got 3 packs of 1 pick that they could have gotten it. So if they have it, then they would have had to pick it up there. All the tricks, all the stuff that you've passed to all your opponents. That's really relevant. Also, it helps, that you can talk in between games and go, oh, blah, blah, blah has 3 counter spells, has this fight spell, has this 1 combat trick. Okay, cool. Now I know that stuff. But when it comes to the actual draft, it's usually more of a tiebreaker scenario is what I've found. Yes, I do not want to pass a big bomb to somebody. Yes, I would like to try to cut broad strokes, the removal or the good cards. I'm just not going to pass premium stuff. But beyond that, I'm just going to draft my deck. And playables, almost never an issue. The common pools are so deep now that there's just so few that you just really can't put into your deck. Anything with power and toughness that they print these days basically is going to be playable on some level. And in this environment, you're going to be fine. You're like, sure, I'll play the 3/2 trample for 3, boo-hoo. It even has upside. That card doesn't see a lot of play. It's like, well, it's totally fine magic card and you can put it into your deck. So to me, that's kind of how I break it down, that you don't need to do backflips, but you just want to, keep in mind that you don't want to ship a great bomb like that black-white mythic rare that Luis passed that one time.
Look, I took a shot. It did not work out. Yeah, I actually do agree that team drafts are not what they used to be, just because there's too many good cards at this point. Mm-hmm. So you can't really cut people off. In general, I don't think discussing strategies ahead of time is that, in terms of don't be like, I'm going to draft blue-green, you're going to draft black-red. That's just obviously nonsense. Right. I think having a good talk about hey, don't pass ridiculous bombs, and just kind of try to pay. The main thing is just pay attention to what you did pass, mm-hmm. And try to it's still good to figure out what the people around you are trying to do, because late in pack 1 or in pack 2, right? Let's say it's pack 2, you're white black, and you get a pack with a good red card and a good green card. You really have to be like, okay, is it more likely that the opponent I'm passing to now is red or green? Because if you get it right, and you hate draft from them, and then they either have to hate draft or let a good card to go to your teammate, that's a huge win. If you hate draft the green card from your teammate and they take a good red card for their deck, huge loss. So
Yep.
try to still figure that out. It still does matter, but it's not the same as before where you're trying to cut people off and trap them or whatever.
Right. But again, I do think that it's underrated, the information in between games, even during games, depending on how you have the rules set up, Alex. But, being able to, it's so huge when Luis drops in and basically tells me all of the instants that my opponent I'm going to play has, or at least all the ones that they saw. Right. It's just like, that's a game changer, right? Oh, hey, this person has 3 +2/+2 and trample for G, right? It's like, whoa, I need to be hyper aware of that card. Like, if it looks like they might have it, they have it, period, right? And so I can play accordingly, where normally it's like, they probably have it, but I haven't seen it yet, that kind of thing. Really cool that you started the league too, Alex.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And Alex says, if people want to get info on the league, like if they're in the LA area or if they just want to see the results and they want to join next season, if you're in LA, you can look at Team Draft LA. That's on Twitter. So you can check that out there if you're a Los Angeles resident. You want to get in on the action. Very cool. Funk, and let us know how it goes. I think that's awesome. Next comes from Matthew Sperling, who says, Hey Marshall and LSV, with the future of professional Magic still up in the air, are there any other games you've considered casting or competing in? Obviously, LSV has already has his dev work with Storybook Brawl. And by the way, Matthew says, fantastic game, by the way.
Awesome. I think that there was a pretty good chance I would have played the Flesh and Blood tournament in Vegas, the Calling in Las Vegas, if not for the fact that Santi was showing up. I just wasn't traveling at that point. Mm-hmm. But I would have been excited to get a deck together and play. I'm not sure about coverage for Flesh and Blood because there's a lot going on in that game, and I would need a bit more practice before I would feel comfortable casting. Marshall makes it look easy, but it's not. and I think that there's a lot of cool games out there for sure. So I know Raptor has been pretty deep into Legends of Runeterra, the League of Legends online game, and the online digital TCG. And that game's pretty cool. I mean, I know how to play the game. I don't play it, so I'm nowhere near up to speed on playing or casting it, but there's a lot of options to get your competitive fix in, which is cool. Because, I would prefer to play Magic competitively over any other game. This is the game I love. But there is, there's a dearth of competitive outlets, and hopefully that'll change as maybe pay-per play starts coming back. Maybe they announce what's coming next in their OP system. All that stuff could be awesome, but as things currently stand, I know Sperling's actually into Star Wars CCG.
You mean Matt Sperling is?
Matt Sperling is, yes. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I guess that's ambiguous.
Yeah.
And I think
this question is from Matthew Sperling, a different person, but yeah.
I wasn't sure actually, but yeah. Yeah, but he tweets about that a lot, and he plays in their big events, and I think that's all player run at this point, because by a committee, because the game is actually out of print, but they still make new cards and stuff, and I think that is really cool. That's obviously just passion driven. So a lot of cool stuff, and there's a lot of opportunities out there if you wanna go deep, and of course I would hope Magic is the first place to go, but if it's not meeting your needs, there are other options, and I do think Storybook Brawl is a great one. We run a tournament every month. I'm doing coverage of this one, and I'm really enjoy that as well.
Yeah, for me, I have not seriously considered doing coverage for other games, mainly because I don't play them. The idea of getting into a game so that I could do coverage for it just doesn't feel right. That's the opposite of how it should go, right? You should be into the thing and then want to cast it, which is how I feel about Magic, but I haven't had that feeling about other games yet. Mainly just because I don't play them. So yeah, I don't see that happening. I did talk a little bit about doing some Flesh and Blood stuff, but I decided ultimately against it just because it didn't feel like I was part of that community, really. And so it felt like I'd be out of place. Also, I don't know the game at all. Like you mentioned, it looks like a pretty hard game too, but I did have a chat with my buddy Tan and Grace, who's been doing coverage for it. And he said he's felt like he found a nice lane with it. So I'm happy to see it's in good hands. He's a good dude. Next question comes from Carl, who says, hi there, both of you. Here's more of a personal question for you two. If you could choose to double the enjoyment you get out of one thing in life, what would you choose? Magic, food, something else?
Exercise.
Definitely exercise, right?
I don't need to enjoy magic or food more than I do. In fact, to some degree, I wish I enjoyed food less. It's something that I actually struggle with.
I was thinking too. If you double a negative number, though, doesn't it get more negative?
Well, I do like exercise, in small doses. Once I'm out there, I actually do enjoy it. Like I've started to jog a little recently, and like once I'm like 15 minutes in, it's great. I'm like, yeah, I should do this more often. Mm-hmm. When I'm sitting in front of my computer and thinking like I should go jog, it's like, nah, I think a lot of reasons not to do it. But I would basically love if the things that were healthier for me were things I enjoyed more than the things that aren't. So,
I'm the same. I mean, I love when I'm playing sports, then I'm great. Like when I play basketball now, again, and I've been playing twice a week and it's great. Like I look forward to it. I think about it all the time. But if I have to like go on an elliptical or lift weights and stuff, I just hate it. I'm just like, I'm so bored. I don't want to be doing this. Everything hurts. And I wish I could find more enjoyment in that. Rob says, hi chaps. Sometimes when I'm watching movies, TV, or listening to music, I'll find something that I know is really bad, but I can't help but love it. Are there any cards or sets that you think are bad, but that you really loved playing anyway for some reason?
I'm trying to think of what the best example. Honestly, to some degree, I think the older draft formats going back, and it's like they're not actually that good. And I've talked about this before, right? How like IPA has terrible mana, how Ravnica has all these kind of unfun commons. I still enjoy them. And when they put IPA up on Magic Online last year, I think I did like 50 drafts in a week or something. Maybe it was closer to like 40, but like I did a lot. I was doing multiple a day every day, So mm-hmm. That's kind of my guilty pleasure, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the only ones that I feel that twinge about are ones where a set will have something that I really like, but I recognize it's not for everybody, right? But I just get to do the thing that I love to do over and over and over again, even though recognizing that like this set is losing popularity every time I do this. Those are the only ones that pop up for that. Axel says, hi, Marshall ZV. Kind of combined us there. I'm curious what you think about the fact that there are two competitive best of 3 events on Arena, Open Day 2 and now the Mythic Invitational Qualifier this weekend, when best of 3 is otherwise not well supported on Arena. For example, I'm personally having trouble getting much out of the traditional queues, the lack of ranking being a fairly big issue. How do I get practice on best of 3 sideboarding and general differences of best of 3 decks? Is my best option to re-download Magic Online after I blissfully said goodbye to it years ago? How do you handle all of this, if at all?
Honestly, I still find Magic Online to be a better place to practice for anything competitive. Like, it's tough because you can't really play Standard on there, or at least it's a little more difficult. You can still play it. It's hard to justify playing Standard on Magic Online versus Arena. And the same with draft queues are kind of hard to fill. But like, if you really care about an event and don't mind Magic Online, you will get better practice, because the only people playing Magic Online at this point are the real diehards.
Yeah.
Or people who like Modern, Legacy, the formats you can't play in Arena. But to play an Arena format on Magic Online, you have to have a really strong preference for, gameplay and spreadsheets as opposed to a video game. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I don't know. I'm just like kind of tilted by the whole how Arena's being everything about Arena right now. So I'm not really like going to be super objective here. I think Arena is just. I think like Alchemy kind of like. I don't like the Alchemy cards that much. I don't like how the Alchemy cards work with Historic. I'm wondering who this is serving, and maybe there's a lot of people having fun out there. I do like drafting on Arena. That's about it for the moment.
Yeah, it's weird because I don't ever notice most of this other stuff because that's all I really do on there is draft. I do play best of 3 on Arena, Axel. I mean, you said you're having trouble getting much out of the traditional queues. The ranking is an issue for you. Perhaps maybe I mean, that is one thing that I'd like to see. I don't really know why that's not the case, but is there any reason for that, Luis? If you split those queues, does it take away from one or something? Or
the fact that the best of 3 is not ranked really does impact how many people play it, and to some degree the caliber of people who play it. I'm not saying people who play best of 3 are bad, but when I've done both, I've found it mythic rank. Once you're at mythic rank, you're facing harder competition than the average best of 3 opponent. Mm-hmm. Just because when you're at mythic rank, you're playing all people who've played a lot. Whereas best of 3, it's like a much wider sample.
Yeah.
I mean, today, like Reed, Magic Online was down, so Reed had to play Arena because otherwise he was going to play Legacy. He joined the best of 3 draft, and it just like took forever for it to fill. So
really?
It's just, and that's also hard. Like, it's really hard to want to wait in a 6-minute queue or something when you could be playing in 30 seconds, if you join a different queue.
But that's what I'm saying. If it was ranked, wouldn't it balance that out a little more?
Yeah. I don't know why they don't want that to be ranked. It feels like you could do both, but
yeah. Anyway, next question comes from Brandon, who says, any tips for how to make better decisions when scrying? It's easy when you're looking for either land or non-land, but I find myself when I'm at 4 or 5 lands falling into the heuristic that anything's not as bad as a land, so I should keep it on top, since if I bottom it, chances are I'm pitching a spell and we'll be drawing a land next or a lot sooner. I think people are not picky enough in this situation. Brandon really has honed in on the crux of it, right? Because if it is a question of land or not land, then that's easy. But I think that people tend to look at it, and if they don't want lands and it's a spell, then they keep it. And I'm more picky than that. I'm like, no, I want to, like, this spell better impact the game. Like, I'm not putting some random 2-drop back on my deck on turn 8 that isn't going to be able to attack, block effectively, or do anything just because it's not a land. Like, I'm going to ship that thing and try to hit something better. If I hit a land, then so be it. But, I want to hit a 5-drop in that situation. And I think that people are, people scry either really slow or really quickly, in my experience. They either just look at it and put it back on top or ship it, or they stare at it, right? And they do the thing where they like tip it up and then put it down and then tip it up again and look at it. It's like, okay. And, for me, I'm asking myself, what do I need here? What, there has to be some minimum bar for affecting the board, and I need it to hit that. And if it doesn't, I'm shipping it.
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on like the situation to some degree, where it's like, I need any spell to get me over the line. I'll keep a 3-drop on turn 8 versus I need the best spell in my deck to win this game. I'm going to put anything but that on the bottom. But in general, as you've seen me play Marshall, I'm much more looking for good stuff as opposed to anything.
Yeah.
It's just an evaluation of, I don't want to like lose the game slower. I want to win the game. So putting a 2-drop on top is generally not going to in the middle of the game, whereas putting a 5-drop on top will.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really important thing. Like, what do you need right now? And where, one little exercise that you could do if you were playing with a friend and it wasn't like some high stakes thing is you could say, all right, just give me a second. And you could just take your whole deck, you're going to reshuffle it, whatever, and then lay out all the cards in like 3 columns. One of them's lands, assuming that you don't need those. And then the other 2 columns, it's these ones are above the bar that I would keep here and why. And then here's the cards that are below the bar and why. Right. And then you get a sense for, well, what is it that, there's probably like in the middle game, it's probably like some of the 3-drops in your deck would be worth keeping and some not. Right. And then mostly speaking, things that cost less than that wouldn't, and cost more than that would, with some exceptions for, removal or something along those lines. So yeah, there you go. I like the question though, Brandon, because you really hit that middle ground. There's a lot of more clear cut. I need a removal spell. That's not a removal spell. Bottom it goes. I need a land, not a land. Bottom it goes. But these ones are the ones that are a little more tricky. Ryan says, what are your thoughts on something like double feature from an, quote, I don't like drafting these point of view, say compared to something curated like Time Spiral Remastered or the arena releases of Amonkhet and Kaladesh? Man, I just don't have much interest in these. I don't think I'm even going to end up playing. Like,
well, first of all, it's not on Arena, so you're definitely not going to play it.
Oh, it's not on Arena at all. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, then I'm definitely not going to play it. But even if it were, these things are like, sure. I mean, I'm not against it, but if you just put something weird up against just the normal set, I just default to drafting the normal set.
Yeah, I'm not into any of this stuff. I don't know why. Like, to some degree, it's like, what does real mean? They're releasing these things. Like, it's not like I have big tournaments to prepare for that would make me choose one format over another, but it doesn't feel real, so I don't want to play it. That's just like kind of the end of the story for me. I'm just not interested in the remastered sets very often, unless it's like Tempest Remastered, because then I'll play a 20-year-old draft format anytime.
Yeah, if it has a Wasteland in it or. Alexander says, what are your hopes for 2022, Magic and non-Magic? Thanks for everything, guys. We appreciate you. Thanks, Alex. What are you hoping for, Luis?
I mean, for Magic, my goal has been basically the same for the past 5 years, which is to play at Worlds and to get a card in my likeness. So,
yeah,
so
and you're off to a good start, right? You got a lot of points at the first set championship.
I'm off to a medium start.
Medium,
like
okay.
10-5, I think, at the first championship puts me in the probably upper 20% of the people, but there's a lot left to play, and you miss once and you're probably dead. So it's not, I don't know what the odds are of me playing at Worlds at the start of the season before any events. I believe my odds have gone up from there, but I'm very far away from a lock. But I if I have one chip on my shoulder, it's that I've just been a match or two out of Worlds a bunch of times in a row.
This has happened a lot, yeah, and it's been very, very close.
And I'll fully admit, I have nothing to complain about. Everything so much goes well for me that honing in on this one thing is kind of dumb. But that being said, you feel what you feel.
Yeah.
As for non-Magic, I just want the people I love to do well, mostly. That's just always my, all I hope for. I don't really have any complaints about life in general. So I'm, I from here on out, now that things have gone well for me, I'm hoping for a low variance life. Up until now, I was hoping for a high variance life.
That's right. It is weird how that changes. Yeah. My Magic goals, for the year, pretty simple. I mean, I don't have a whole lot going on outside of the podcast, right? I've got a few coverage gigs, but it's so stripped down. That's almost nothing there. So, I just want to make sure that I stay engaged, keep up on everything with it. Keep doing what I've been doing as far as, drafting a bunch and that kind of stuff. Cause that to me is really the important thing, is that I got my feet on the ground, right? I want to make sure that I always keep that going. And then non-Magic related, I'm kind of hoping for some stability. The watch channel has experienced a lot of growth in the past couple of months. And I don't know if that means that I had a good couple of months, or that the channel's now in kind of a different space for, what it could be. I've just been doing it because I liked doing it for a long time, but it's starting to get enough views and stuff. And all the metrics behind the scenes, are starting to really it's different now. It's caught on. And so I'm putting a lot of effort into that, but I want that to be stable. I want to be able to keep working at the channel and doing the things that I'm doing for it, but I want to kind of figure out where it's going to stand. Because I just don't know in 6 months if I'll look back and be like, oh yeah, that was when I leveled up and never looked back. Or if I'm going to look back and go, man, November, December sure was crazy. Well, hopefully I'll get back to that again someday or whatever. And so I'm hoping to kind of just keep my head down and keep working and making the videos that I think are good and the way that I think they should be made, and then let the chips fall. Peter says, used to never drink coffee. It just bores me as a hot drink. Nice, Peter. Some time ago, I tried cold brewed coffee as per your advice, loved it, and never looked back. Any new recommendations for drinks?
Well, first of all, if you haven't tried the Arnold Palmer, that is the official drink of Limited Resources.
Damn right. I got one right here.
I have I don't have an AP. I just have the iced tea. I didn't have any lemonade. But for those of you who don't know, an Arnold Palmer is a mix of black tea, unsweetened, and lemonade. And if you have a sweet tooth, 70% lemonade, 30% tea is one way to do it. If you go, the traditional, I think, is closer to 50-50. I find I enjoy it most when it's about 70% tea, 30% lemonade.
I'm a 70-30 guy too.
But it also depends how sweet the lemonade is. The less sweet it is, the more, I wouldn't mind having it in there. But so, of course, the Arnold Palmer is great. The best coffee I had, the life-changing coffee I had, was a cold brew coffee I got at GP San Diego. It was the one that Michael Majors won with Blue Red Mill. I was doing coverage. I was walking to the site. There was a guy who had a cart in the streets of San Diego, and he was selling coffee. And I got a special, and it was cold brew coffee with half and half cardamom and cinnamon, and he like shook it, like blended it, you know. And now I put cardamom and cinnamon in my coffee when I want something a little bit more next level. And honestly, it's fantastic. So that's a big one. It takes you do have to stir it really well. Like I actually have one of those little like zzz, like electric stirrers.
Oh yeah. Because
otherwise, like the herbs or the spices don't mix too well, especially cinnamon kind of clumps on the top. But if you have one of those, it stirs in well. And honestly, they cost like $10 on Amazon or something. So that's my like overall favorite way to enjoy coffee. But obviously, I just love coffee, so there's no real wrong way to have coffee.
You can have all the coffee for me. Next one comes from Corey, who says, "Greetings, gentlemen. Tracking some of the recent additions to LR, I'm really digging some of the extra entertainment stuff that seems to be popping up around the edges of the cast. Guests like Sirkovitz and the LR LOL showdowns. This question maybe is hinting at the future, but one, is there an unexplored content creation space that you would love for LR to dip your toe into? And two, besides being part of the CFB family, is there a way to submit a formal request to take on the LR time in a 3 versus 3 draft situation with other limited content creators? Would the request on a fine bit of parchment suffice? As always, appreciate you letting the audience pick your brains for an hour each week. By the way, I met Corey at the Vegas event, and Corey does a podcast called Draft, an MTG podcast that's kind of a storytelling kind of thing. It's pretty cool. It's a unique take on the podcast. So you can tell that this question came from a fellow content creator. Any takes on this stuff, Luis? Unexplored content creation, and then are we taking applications to battle?
So for unexplored, I guess it's not fully unexplored in that because I've done a little bit of it, but me and Sam Party played a couple old like throwback matchups from like top 8s of old Pro Tours, and there's a lot more to delve there.
I loved those. Those are so fun.
Yeah. Those are a lot of fun. We were going to do more, and we probably will do more. It's just we got busy. Things like that kind of happen.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing more of that. Like, I think that running tournaments of old formats can be kind of fun too. Like if you get enough people who want to do it. The other thing, and this is something I actually want to start doing. I have a lot of things I want to do, but it's kind of, again, hard to find time to do all of them, is I actually kind of want to do more like old throwback draft formats, especially like maybe like reasonable stake money drafts. Like, I don't know. I get a squad, we take on challengers and we play for a couple $100 or something. That would be exciting to me. And I'm sure I could find people on both sides of that. So
I love that. I mean, if you could get teams together and then roughly speaking, the team stayed together so that you could have like an idea for what the landscape looked like for, let's say, a season. And it would be like, oh, Luis is playing Huey's team tonight. You can't miss it. that would be so fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's even more organized than I was thinking. But yes, a draft league could be fun. I mean, in Vegas many years ago, they ran like a money draft championship, and it was like $5,000 buy-in per team or something. Yeah. I didn't go to this one, and that stuff's super cool. Like if they're not going to give us high stakes limited, we've gotten the showdowns, and I've loved the showdowns. I'm really grateful that the Lords are into battle, because like it's always a good time, and I could definitely see expanding that and taking on other folks, maybe, having a 4-team thing or something. I don't know. There's a lot of space now that the online tools are there where you can play against people on a variety of platforms. So,
I mean, even another just brainstorming would just be like, let's say you made a team, like a super team, right? And you're just like, come at us. Here's how much it costs, right? Like $1,000 a person, $500, like real, and just be like, you can be whoever you are. Like we're taking, this week we're going to play against Bob and his 2 buddies, right? And they wanted a battle, so let's do it, right? And you can just, do it that way. That would be kind of a cool way to see if the super team could hold down the fort or not,
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd make a lot of money too. And then what about the other question from Corey about, are people able to submit a formal request to play against us? We're not really doing that, right?
No, I mean, like, I definitely appreciate the sentiment, but like, it's right now, given the amount of projects that we have kind of on the different burners. It's more of a don't call us, we'll call you sort of thing. So
yeah, it's just tough.
You know,
it's just, I mean, we barely have enough. We have a hard time fitting in the one that we do with Lords of Limited. We had to reschedule a couple of times.
The amount of negotiation to get all 6 of us on the same day.
Yeah, it was really tough.
And like half of us, more than half of us are content grifters too.
I know. I'm walking the dog that day. Yeah. But Corey, thanks for the questions. Appreciate it. And as I mentioned, if you want to check out some kind of stories, nostalgia, that kind of stuff, it's Draft and Draft for Corey's podcast. RJ says, per your past advice, I've gotten religious about prioritizing 2 drops. Another question I have, is there a maximum I should consider for removal spells in a draft and or a minimum for creatures? It may be a results-oriented bias, but I feel like I'm getting run over in Vow, which doesn't seem overly aggro-oriented. Being able to get multiple late bleed dries and heroes downfalls seems too good to pass up, but then I get completely smashed by what I think are mediocre creatures.
So there's no hard and fast rule. In fact, this is a very common question. I tuned into Ben S.'s stream the other day, and someone asked him that literal question, oh, how many creatures? What's the minimum number of creatures, or what's the max number of removal? There is no number, but ideally you have a creature base that means you don't have to use good removal spells on bad creatures, because your opponent's going to play a 2-drop most games. Your opponent's going to play a 3-drop almost every game. If you have no creatures in your deck, well, you need to have removal spells for every single one of those. Clearly, that's a bit inefficient because it's harder to get removal than creatures. And a 3/3 can hold off 2 2/2s, whereas a Doomblade has to just go 1-for-1 for all these. So what you want to do is draft a couple creatures, a decent amount of creatures. Not, if you're in a control deck, you can get away with like 6 or 7, and have some of them be early defensive creatures. Like a 1-mana 0/4, we kind of count as an early removal spell, right? Or a 2-mana 1/3 with a minor ability or something like that. Part of the reason that creatures that kind of provide card advantage are so cool is like when you play an Organ Hoarder, obviously that card's kind of busted, but 4-mana 3/2 that can trade off, and that's what's so strong is you would trade off against something and you'd be up a card, so it's perfect for any control deck. When it comes to creature minimums, it's less you need 14 creatures and more how are you planning on winning this game? Well, If you're an aggressive deck, you probably do need around 14 creatures because it's kind of hard to have enough 2-drops and enough finishers if you don't. If you're a control deck, I've had 5 creature control decks where 2 of them are 5 or 6 mana finishers and 3 of them are early defensive creatures, then I have a bunch of card draw and removal. More typical would be 10 creatures or so in a control deck. But it's more what does your deck need? What is your composition? And limited is a little more complicated than just, you need at least 10 to 14 creatures.
Yeah, you can use those thumbnails, but they fall apart quickly, just like Brad and everything else. Nikolai Bolas says, hey, Marshall and Luis, my question is about how you decide to add a new project to your lives. Ooh, good question. For Marshall, I've been super impressed by the Wristwatch Revival videos, and I was wondering what made you decide to take the leap into another content outlet when you already had a lot going on. For Luis, I was wondering what factored into the decision to join the Storybook Brawl team so early in its lifespan when you're already making tons of Magic content. I'm super impressed by all the work you guys do. It's always a ton of fun and the best quality, so I'm just wondering how you make these decisions about where to apply yourselves. In a related vein, how do you draw the line between activities you enjoy doing for fun and what you decide to make content on? Woo, this is a good question from Nikolai. Do you want to go first, Luis?
Yeah, for me, when I look at new potential projects or new things to spend my time on, it's true. The bar is pretty high for me to want to devote any serious amount of time to something, but really I have had the luxury, and I fully admit it's a luxury, of having a pretty high amount of agency of how do I want to spend my time? What do I think is the best way to do it? And, when I looked at Storybook Brawl, honestly, it's just the short answer is the game hooked me. I played the game for they released on in beta. They're like, hey, you want to try this out? I'm like, yeah, because I'd played it early in alpha, but it was a much rougher version. I didn't really get a good sense of it. I played it a little. But then I played it in beta, and after literally a day of playing it, I'm like, I want to work on this game. This game is awesome. I think it's
I remember
incredible.
You telling me that when you said this game is sweet, and you just really liked it right away.
Yeah, and that, that hasn't changed. And in that case, that was just like the game sold me on it. And of course, the fact that the people working on it are all very good friends of mine, that obviously was a very big part of it too. When it comes to like, hey, let's do the LR versus LOL showdown, right? That's like a new thing. It was like, hey, we've got no outlet to play high stakes limited. We've got the arena opens every now and then, but that's not enough. And it's like, I also, I like the friendly rivalry we had between the podcasts, because even before the showdown, there always was some amount of like comparison between the two podcasts, right?
Mm-hmm, sure.
Like we're two people, two podcasts in the same space. And then of course, Alex, Court of Calls does his thing as well. And then the showdowns, if we did the first one and it wasn't fun, we might not have done another one, but they've been fun. They've been great. We think that they're worth the time we spend on them. And it's not that every decision for me, and I know the same is true, for you, it doesn't come down to dollars and cents. You didn't launch the watch channel because you're like, wow, this is a way to make more money.
No.
Because for the most part, most new ventures that you do are likely to be less efficient than things you've already spent a bunch of time into honing and building an audience for and all that. So I think for both of us, it comes down to what is something you'll be passionate about. Of course, sometimes it works out. I know the watch channel is working out for you. I have no complaints, obviously, about how Storybook Brawl is going, but you don't know these things at the beginning. And when it comes down to it, like there have been projects we started and kind of died on the vine, right? Like, totally. You've had some like interview style podcasts and stuff that like just you haven't done with those for a while. I don't know if they're forever backburnered, but like clearly you looked at your time and you're like, hey, this isn't where I want to be spending my time, right?
Right.
And I've gotten, I don't know, I worked at Dyro for a long time. I eventually came to the conclusion, hey, I want to try something different. And, that's not to say that when you move on from something, it didn't succeed. It just sometimes the time is right to do something else. And I don't know, we're both also governed by like boredom to some degree of like, hey, I've done this thing for a long time. I want to do something else to just do something else. Like, I think that's generally a healthy thing for people to do. Like, if you're content doing the same thing over and over, that's great. But I think it's healthier for your brain and your life in general to do some amount of mixing things up if you have the opportunity to do so. Yeah,
I do too. And, for me, like I started the watch channel for the same reason that I started the podcast. Right. And it was just because it was what I was doing. Right. Like when I first started the LR with Ryan, I was talking to him a lot about Magic and how to get better at it. And so we decided to take that onto the airwaves. And when I started doing the watch channel, it was similar. I was exploring my new hobby of restoring watches. And I started doing that in some ways because I used to work on cars and I don't have the space to do that. And I just wasn't doing much with my hands, right? Like editing videos or doing podcasts or whatever. But my family, are all mechanics, auto mechanics. Like I'm used to like working on stuff, getting my hands dirty and that kind of stuff. And I don't do that now, do I, Luis? Because I wear those stupid little things. But
I was going to make a comment about that.
Yeah. but it scratched the same itch of like, hey, I'm taking something and fixing it just like I did with cars before. And then, I have the filming equipment and at that point I had built up the video editing and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, this is really fascinating to me. Right. Like the world of working on watches, restoring them and stuff. There's something to this. I had the same feeling about Magic when I first got exposed to the highest levels, the competitive professional scene, where I'm like, there is something here. This isn't just people playing a game and kind of seeing what happens. And I felt that same way about the watch stuff. And so I said, well, I'm going to start making these videos, but I mean, you do them because you want to, you don't put any expectations on it. Now, Luis and I are also both people, though, who are entrepreneurial. We will look around the spaces that we're in or that we might want to be in and go, well, could I do that? Could I be better? Could I make an impact in that space? How would I approach it if I did? And that's just how our brains work. And that's how mine does for sure. And so, when I started making the videos, I put a ton of thought into them. I didn't just start like turning on cameras and throwing stuff up on the internet. If you look at the very first video I did, the first thing I say is welcome back to another video or whatever, right? Because I was like, well, if I'm going to do these, I don't want to have that thing that everybody does where they go, hi, so this is my first video and I don't really know what I'm doing. And it's like, okay. And then you have to like fast forward a year before the person goes, before they kind of hit their stride. I'm like, no, I know how to do content. I've been doing this for years. I'm going to figure out what I want this thing to be up front. And then of course I will tweak it and change it over time, which I have, but I want to hit the ground running, And so, so I started doing that. Now it's been 2 years, right? It's really been about 1.5 years, but since I started the thing, but I've put in, I've got, I don't know, 40 videos up on the channel or something. They're each an hour long. They took me forever to, and I had to buy watches. They're not cheap. I put a ton into the thing, and, you
tweeted about the $20,000 watch you bought just the other day.
It was not $20,000. And that did, by the way, straight up come in a deck box. Like, if anybody's not on Twitter, check out one of my last tweets. I got a watch off of eBay to restore, and they sent it to me. They do an authentication thing on it, and they sent it to me, and I'm like, this is just straight up deck box, and it just is. They apparently just ship their watches in deck boxes. They're probably cheap or something, but anyway, the other thing that I was thinking when I started the channel was I want to have something that's separate from Magic. And there's 2 reasons that I wanted to do that. One of them was I want to be able to build something that I can put my time into that's kind of a pillar that's unassociated with like a third party, right? In this case, perfect example. Wizards decided to basically cut the pro scene for 1.5 years at the minimum. And that really affected me financially, right? I'm just like, wow, there goes like one of my big parts of my jobs just went from, 100% down to 30% or something, right? It's like, wow, that's an adjustment. And so I don't want to have to, I like being associated with Wizards. I don't have any problem with it, but everything that I do doesn't need to be, right? And so,
exactly.
And I have other interests. So I was like, yeah, I want to establish something there. And then I'll be honest, there's also part of me that wants to, I don't know if it's just a ego thing, an insecurity. I don't really know how to break it down, but I want to prove myself to, I don't even know to who. It's probably just to myself, but I want to say, look, what if you just got really lucky, Marshall? What if you started a podcast when podcasts were just coming around? What if you hit the beginning of a magic wave that really wasn't your doing it all, but just you got lucky with the timing of it, right? What if all of these things that you've kind of parlayed from that, doing coverage and doing all that stuff, was just really a result of timing, or luck, or, was heavily influenced? Because I know that those are big factors in really any success that you have in your life. You're going to look back and go, well, I did get pretty lucky that I started it then. But then there's all this other stuff that you have to do too. And it's like, that can get a little muddy. And so, I'm like, well, I'm established in Magic, right? But I'm not established in this watch space. I have and people that play Magic don't really care about watch. It's not like I can be like, hey, audience, go watch my watch. They're like, I don't care. I mean, my first 5 videos got like 150 views or 200 views or something, right? Because it was just, I had nothing. It wasn't like I brought an audience with me. I don't even tweet about it enough, apparently. But
you definitely don't.
Yeah, it's really bad. But yeah, and then so I'm just like, well, I wonder if I can take the things that I've learned, take my style of content creation, however you want to call that. I have a lot of opinions on it. I think about this stuff a lot, and apply it again in a completely different space and see if I can make it a thing, And so that's motivational for me, right? Cause I want to be like, hey, I want this stuff to hit a bunch of people, but I also want to do it my way, right? I'm not going to do top 10 whatevers and, all the stuff that we know kind of gets the hits or whatever. So those are some of the factors, Nikolai, that led me to starting the watch channel. But frankly, it could have been anything. I've done a whole bunch of stuff to varying degrees of success, and it just, you learn from it, you move on. Sometimes you keep doing it, whatever. But there's a lot that goes into starting something new for me, because I know that I need to be able to do this without any real compensation or reward. Like, yes, I probably wouldn't do the watch channel for 5 years straight if I was getting 150 views. Okay, fine. But, I need to be able to do this for a couple of years without really getting anything out of it. Because otherwise I'm going to give up or change it at some point before. couple more questions. This one comes from Cody, who says, "Hey guys, I'm just curious how both of you generally feel about the future of Magic. With changes to professional play, alchemy, secret layers, and everything in between, it's safe to say that the face of Magic has changed dramatically in a short time. Your perspective is much larger than my own, so I'm curious what you think." Thanks. Great question.
I believe Magic will continue to be quite successful and tons of people will enjoy it. I don't know that the landscape's moving in a direction that I'm going to. I can't promise that. Like, if they come up with a robust, organized play plan, that's going to go a long way for me, because that's a lot of what I care about. It's not the only thing I care about, but that's a lot of what I care about. And I wouldn't be shocked if, in a couple of years I wasn't involved with Magic, but I also think it's more likely that I will be. But you cut too much of the stuff I care about, I'm going to find other things to care about. That said, Magic's it contains multitudes. I don't see any reason why this all couldn't exist at once. It has for a long time, like you can have secret layers, you can have arena, you can have alchemy, you can have commander, you can have all the different formats, and you can have, some type of competitive play. I'm not even in a position where I need to do that as a profession, which is great, because that means I have a lot more flexibility. But if there's nothing for me to engage with on that axis, I'll probably retreat back to drafting on Arena and, playing Vintage on Magic Online, but not having it be as big of a part of my life as it has been in the past. But it's kind of out of my control. That said, I'm never going to stop playing Magic. That's not really on the table for me. I mean, I'll always have connections to Magic, and I just don't know what those will look like.
Yeah, I feel similarly in that I a lot of this stuff doesn't feel like it's for me either. Some of it does concern me. Some of it's also kind of exciting. I really feel like how these things are implemented really matters. Specifically, secret layers and alchemy are two things that really stand out recently, where if you do them right, then they can really add a lot to the bottom line for Wizards, and they can create some exciting products that are for the people who want them. And then the other people can be like, whatever. But there's a fine line. If you overdo secret layers, which, some people think they're already doing, but I mean, there's
we've crossed that line, but
there's a lot more room for them to go if they really, but those do start to encroach on your audience. I mean, you are effectively, printing cards that are lowering the value of the cards that are in circulation. And, it doesn't feel great to the audience. So you have to be careful, right? There's a fine line. Alchemy. Look, when we first had Arena come out, it was like they were talking about the authentic Magic experience and recreating that online. And I kind of felt like, to me, I interpreted that as it's going to mirror paper. The temptation to have that power of being able to modify cards and create a new design space looks like it was a bit too much for them. I can totally understand it. It's a little arbitrary to say, yeah, let's just anchor everything to cardboard, when it's like, but we have so many more things we can do on Arena. But that doesn't feel good to me. Like it feels like it strikes at the fundamentals of the game and takes us not in a bad direction necessarily, but definitely in a different one. And that leads to instability and fear, right? Because it's change. It's scary. It could end up being that it's a much better place where we land. There is some really cool design space that they could hit. We talked about it last week on the show about, hey, what if they can tweak around limited? Maybe limited just gets way better, right? Like there's those options. But the way I see it is I always will be able to kind of retreat back to the things that I really love, which is drafting and talking about it like with Luis on the show. And I can have my little space and kind of just do that. And then when the professional stuff ramps up again, I can be involved with that as much as I can, because that's the other thing that I really enjoy about the game. But that's how it's always been. I mean, Commander came out of nowhere and ended up being the biggest thing in Magic. And that hasn't affected I don't actively play Commander really, but that's great. There's more people out at the events, they're selling more cards. Everything's good. There's like Luis said, tons of space in the game for this type of stuff. So I'm not really that worried about that. It's just it's things like gutting the competitive play that worry me, because that does kind of fundamentally change some of the stuff I really like about it.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't need competitive play to be on LR, to talk to you, to draft, to play, to do CR, all these things. But I can tell you that if there's absolutely zero competitive play, which I don't think is likely, but if in the world where there's zero competitive play, I think my interest in Magic would, and all the things, including what I'm doing now on LR, all that stuff would also drop, just because competitive play is just a big part of my experience, my relationship with Magic. If there was literally none of that, like, I would probably try to find something else because I just have that competitive spirit in me. It's not about the money. It's not really about anything, but I like proving myself against other people, and drafting on the arena ladder doesn't feel like that to me.
Right.
So,
yep. That's huge. I also do feel that if they completely, like if they go too far with gutting the competitive play system, I do think it'll affect their bottom line, but just not right away. Like, I think it drives a decent amount of demand for cards. So. Yeah. Well, I do too, honestly. I mean, I think it drives a decent amount of demand for cards, for people wanting to play them in tournaments and stuff. And then I also feel, though, even more importantly, that we've really got a sense now for what it feels like to kind of not have any goalposts on the horizon, right? Something to lean forward to. It's so strange to be logically aware of something, but still have it affect you, kind of a placebo effect thing. But, if I go to a tournament and there's first place gets you to the Pro Tour, that I find that inexplicably motivating, because I'm not going to get first place, right? It's going to be extraordinarily rare for me to actually win a large tournament that I enter, right? And, if I had to take the over under, on number of tournaments, big tournaments I would win in my life, it's going to be 0, right? And I know that walking in, yet it lends legitimacy to the whole thing to me, to know that there's this bigger world out there where there's, the Luis Scott-Vargases of the world battling. And, I like to talk about my buddy Woody a lot because he's played in a couple of PTs and he's the exact same way, right? He qualified a couple of times. He top 8'd at GP and he won a PTQ on one of the team things. But, like, that's only 2 times in 8 years, but it's still motivational because it's out there and he got to play with the best players in the world. And if you cut that all away, people like Woody and me, we lose a lot of interest, even though, like, I'm mostly drawing dead to do anything meaningful in that space. And, Woody's had his successes, but it's like, that isn't really the point. It's just that is out there and that could happen. And I think that that's the type of thing that kind of comes out in the wash, like maybe 2 to 3 years later, where you're like, what is going on with our numbers? And it's like, well, there was an underlying motivational and credibility thing that is now gone. Okay, a couple more questions left here. This one comes from Eric, who says, hey, Marshall and Luis, I'd love to hear you talk about the decisions that go into making cuts for a particular archetype when you have an excess of playables, as is so often the case these days.
I think for me, what I end up doing is making sure I have enough 2-drops, which unless you're aggressive, around 4 or 5 is a good number. If you're aggressive, you want like 6 or 7 or more. Try not to go overboard on the expensive cards, especially. And one of the cool things about like Val, for example, is if you have a couple copies of Falcon Wrath Celebrants, you don't need anything more expensive. They're your late game, which is why like Pyre Spawn is not a card I value very highly. So you can kind of make those cuts. And then at some point, like, one of the things that gets worse in multiples you have to look at is things like, Gift of Fangs, which is already kind of like not the strongest card, but 2 damage effects, like 1 mana for 2 damage effects, or especially 1 damage effects, those drop off really quickly. Whereas 3 damage effects don't really, because they hit so much stuff. But like, I've definitely cut, like, from Midnight Hunt, like Play with Fire from my deck when I had, I had 1 blue-red deck that had 3 of them. And it's like, I think I should play 2 because I have bunch of other good removal. Red was super open. And one of the ways you can lose is to draw 2 of those against someone who just has played 3/3/3s or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I try to start with the most focused version of a deck. Like, I push it to the extreme and then I back it off from there. I want to see what the most, if I'm playing a spells deck, what does the deck look like where I'm really playing all the spells and, all my cantrips, everything I can possibly get in there, and even cutting reasonably powerful cards to do so. And then I'll start to go, okay, I think I can trim here because I run the risk of kind of doing nothing with a deck like this, right? I might just end up spinning my wheels. And so I like to push it to the extreme and then back it off to something more reasonable rather than trying to like start off in the middle somewhere. Because sometimes you just go, no, this looks good. Like, yeah, I'm leaving some powerful stuff in the board, but like literally every creature I have is an elf or whatever. And this is an elves deck that I have a ton of payoffs for it. So it's worth it to just be like full tribal rather than playing a couple of hand-picked, slightly more powerful creatures or whatever. But I want to get a snapshot of what the most extreme version of the deck looks like. Greg says, I started playing Magic in January 2021 after the Kaldheim release. It's now my favorite hobby, and I love the challenge of competing against more experienced players. I've never played in paper, and I'm a bit daunted by everything I'll need to remember when I eventually do. Any advice for new players on etiquette when playing at an LGS for the first time?
Really,
boy, that could be tough, huh?
I would say for etiquette wise, just don't stress too much. Like, just be friendly. And for the most part, people are going to be pretty chill. Like, my experience, even before, like, I was known at all. When I just random dude going into a card shop, I've found people to be mostly pretty relaxed about it. Like, one thing is Arena handles all your triggers for you. So you got to kind of remember some of those things. You might find that, like, oh man, I'm not used to having to pay attention to this aspect. But for the most part, just kind of go in with open mind, kind of be relaxed, maybe take a little more time than you're used to make sure everything's going fine. But I don't think there's any big etiquette things that I can think of.
No, I think the one thing I would say that's not really etiquette, but just more like to be aware of is I would be very communicative. I would lean towards being more communicative than less. You know, you'll see it happen all the time at LGSs where like people start firing off spells in the middle of combat, you know, and it's like, are we at blocks yet? And like nobody said anything about like, I'm not going to block. Okay, I'm going to pass priority. Okay, now we're at damage. You know, it's like you need to over explain that stuff because Arena just handles it all. You know, just announce your triggers. Just say, okay, so I trigger this. I'm going to draw a card. I'm going to do 1 damage to that. Right. And then just sort of just talk it through. And that way it reduces any confusion. Because the worst is when you get 2 people who are doing it and then nobody knows what's actually going on in the game and things just sort of happen. And it's like, I've sat next to it before where I've seen that and I'm just like shaking my head because I'm like, the way that actually played out isn't possible. Right? Like you didn't have priority. You can't just cast a spell there. And now the person's reacted to it. But if it would have gone the way it's supposed to, it would have been the opposite, right? Where somebody would have, you know, I don't know, ran out of pump spell and then gotten blown out versus the opposite. And it's like, yeah, if they just would have said what was happening, then that would have been better. Steve says, so we know that you two and many other high-level Magic players love playing basketball. So what style of game do you play? And can we get a full scattering report on the whole MTG pickup basketball crew, NBA comps wherever appropriate? That's pretty good. How did you describe your style, Luis?
I'm definitely a shooter.
Top of the key gunner?
Yeah.
I think that's how I would describe you.
Yeah, I think I shoot a lot more than I'm not great at like driving. Like that is not among my skill.
More of a catch and shoot kind of Klay Thompson kind of guy.
But I'm okay at rebounding. It's actually funny when we would go play basketball at like the gym, I would be, you know, not never the tallest, but usually in like the upper like 25%. When I play basketball with Magic players, I'm in closer to the median.
I know, it's crazy.
Magic players are all so goddamn tall.
I know, it's funny.
So, and then you're just a little bit more versatile because you're just much better at basketball than I am. So I don't know, how would you describe yourself? Yeah,
that's what I've tried to be is, you know, they call it being like a triple threat or, you know, basically like if you can get good enough at all the things, then they all feed off of each other. So for example, in my older age, I've put a lot of time into getting good at 3-point shots, right? Because if you make a couple of 3-pointers, then the person has to come stand closer to you to guard you so that you can't shoot them. And now you can drive around them because they're standing too close, right? Where if they're standing far away, I may not be quite quick enough to get around them anymore. And so, you know, I won't have a choice. So the way I can punish them is by shooting the threes. And then also I'm tall. So when I was growing up, I learned how to play under the basket a fair bit. And so I can go post up if they decide to put a little guy on me, and I can go down there and kind of push them around and get some baskets that way. So I try to just set myself up so that I can look at who's guarding me and then make adjustment. Like I can say, well, it's a small person, I'm going to take him down low. It's a big guy, I'm going to pull him out away from the basket where they're not comfortable. Medium, I'm going to kind of figure out what they can do and sort it out from there. Some of the other players, who else? Reed is, you go ahead.
I was gonna say Matt Nass is the quintessential, like, he's always getting rebounds.
He's a rebound machine.
He's just really good at kind of getting in there, and it's actually funny when Matt and I play. It's actually good for us to be on the same team because he's not great at shooting, like from any reasonable distance, but he's good at layups. He's good at like the close shots, and he's really good at muscling in there. He's a lot scrappier than you might think.
He's a rebounding machine. He's like early Charles Barkley rebounder for sure. Who are some of the others? P. Sully, good all-arounder, really good basketball player, good guard, can keep you honest from really anywhere. And also, as you might imagine, just a really smart player, like just understands the game and will put you in a position to succeed. So that's good. Who else? Reed is like, there's a bunch of Magic players like this. He's kind of like the soccer player, basketball player, where like he can run forever. He's athletic. He's strong. He gets in the way. He's really good on defense. But then when it comes to like the finer points of the skill aspects, he's a little bit, behind the curve on that. So that's that, it's like,
I mean, you just described Raptor, except he fouls more than what you're saying.
Yeah. Raptor's definitely soccer player. Totally. Yeah. Who else comes out and hoops with us? Chapin used to. He's scrappy as all hell.
Chapin's like a force of nature.
He's got a lot of energy, and he goes really hard.
No one really knows what's going to happen when Chapin gets the ball at the top of the key, like including him. But he's tall, he's athletic, like he makes action happen. That's for sure.
Ben Stark's a really good. He's a 3-point specialist. Like he loves to hang out there. He's got a weird release on his shot, but it's effective. I tried to figure out how it worked once when we were in Vegas one time for the World Series of Poker. I like laid on the ground to try to see what his hand was doing. I just couldn't figure it out. But when he gets going, he can cook pretty good too. Yeah, there's a lot of us magicians. I've got some footage of on a couple of the vlogs that I did on MTG Breakdown still up on YouTube. You can watch us all playing. Cheon's in there too. He's a good all-arounder. What about Huey? We didn't mention Huey.
It's tough because Huey's gotten into like much better shape than when we were basketballing at the PT. Actually, him and I have been on a reverse cycle there. And so Huey, I bet, is even like way more athletic than he used to be, which is crazy. Like he's been really going hard. So yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if his game has changed significantly, though obviously
his arms are so long. Tall. It's just like the only chance I have is to pull him way out from the basket and then go around him because I'm faster than him. But like if he catches me down there, you can't move him. Like he's solid. Yeah. He really is. And then he just jumps up and blocks you. And when you're tall like me, I'm not used to getting blocked like that easily. What the hell is happening here? But
one of the funniest matchups, because there's Shahar, who's also very tall, but like not the most skilled in like the athletic like maneuvers of basketball, but he's very tall and athletic himself. And watching him go up against like Matt Nass and Matt Nass just kind of running him over is just really funny.
Yeah, it is really good. Yeah, Matt Nass is one of my favorite Magic people to play with because he's such a hustler. Okay, let's call it there, Luis. That was really good. We got to a bunch of questions, and we thank everybody for submitting them. That was really great, and we always appreciate it. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR, and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast over at lrcast.com. I want to thank our sponsors, Channel Fireball. Make sure you check them out for all of your holiday needs. If you're buying something for a magician or a Flesh and Blood player, Pokemon player, you can head over to Channel Fireball and pick up whatever you need. And we do appreciate you their support of the show. Also, FTX, if you're looking to get into digital assets of any type, NFTs, cryptocurrencies. If you want to know what DeFi is, all that kind of stuff, you can head over to ftx.us in the United States and ftx.com outside and check them out. Make sure that you do consult an investment professional before you do investments of any kind, of course. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
I've got to run, but I do want to drop a quick recommendation for a board game that we've really been enjoying. In fact, I'm late to go play it right now. It's Time Stories. It's TIME, like as an acronym, stories. And basically, it's like kind of like an escape room in a box. Like there's a story, and you and some friends go around and play it and try to figure out what mystery is going on. You're taking the part of like time travelers, but the cool thing is you almost never beat it in the first run through, which means you set it up again and you play again, but you know what happened the first time, so you have a lot more knowledge of where to go and who to talk to and what to do. And then they have a bunch of different ones. And so like the first one, you're like in an asylum in the 1900s in France. And then the second one, you're in ancient Egypt and stuff like that. And we're having a really good time going through them. So check it out. Time Stories is a lot of fun.
Cool. Have fun with it.